And if we don't want to repeat what happened in the late 30s and 40s, what do we have to do? What is the, having studied history, the right way to handle this and head that off?
Well, I think one of the things is to make sure that capitalism works for the majority of people, to look at the bottom 60% of the population and use that as metrics to say, is that improving or not, and how do you approach that wealth gap? And it's not just a wealth gap. I think more important than the wealth gap is an opportunity gap, that people need to be made useful by being able to have jobs and so on. So I think that that should be considered, an imperative. I think that we have to be thinking about our balance of payment situation and the amount of debt that we're producing. We're in a very privileged position of having a reserve currency. One of the things that distinguishes countries that really have problems from those who are able to manage their debt problems is whether the the debt is denominated in one's own currency. That requires us, in order to do that, to continue to maintain sound basic finance. I think we're going to have, though, a squeeze that will be not just related to debt, but even more importantly, related to pensions and health care obligations that will happen. So I think these will be difficult times, not immediately, but I think in maybe a few years. And I think it will be very dependent on how we are with each other.
So let me ask you about both of those. First, how do we make capitalism work for everybody? It seems like part of the problem is that, as you pointed out, the rise in asset values are not accruing to 60 to 80% of the population. Anytime you suggest that companies pay people more, the financial class will say, oh, that's outrageous, it should be free markets, we can't have minimum wage, and it should be, hey, Ayn Rand was right, you want a raise, you've got to bargain for it. So how in that, you obviously care about the economy, how do we make capitalism work for everybody without wrecking it?
I think the first thing that you need to do is realize that it's the issue is a national emergency. I would like the president to declare it as a national emergency and then use metrics to judge that. In other words, take the population, the bottom 60%, and take those numbers and make them metrics. And then bring together a commission of people, a bipartisan commission, to be dealing with this. I think there are a lot of things that could be done. I see it to some extent philanthropically. I see it in education. For example, in education, we're in a situation where, in many cases, terrible, terrible conditions in education. Literally, in schools that I know, children are having to share pencils. They'll break a pencil in half and sharpen it at both ends, or they'll pass it back and forth. They don't have adequate books. There are some. Those children in Connecticut, where the state that I'm from, which is either the richest or certainly one of the top 3 richest states in the country, we have 22% of the high school population that is either disconnected or disengaged. And so I'll tell you what that means. A disengaged student is one that attends high school but doesn't participate. They don't study, they don't really make progress. A disconnected student is one that they don't even know where they are. 22% of the population in Connecticut is one of those, and high school students is one of those. Those are students that are not going to be able to be productive. They're going to be on the streets. If you look at the cost of incarceration is between $85,000 and $125,000 typically a year in terms of that. So there are certain things I think you could create public-private partnerships so that these some programs do well. I support, for example, microfinance. Microfinance in being able to bring about. There are many things, forget the things that I'm supporting. I'm saying if we take an initiative and you say a national emergency and you bring together others and you establish metrics like good management of that, I think that you will be making progress toward dealing with that in public public-private partnership. I don't know what'll happen. I don't think that's going to happen. I have no prospect of that. That's why I'm a little bit concerned that what will the next downturn will be like.
And does it require our raising taxes? Because the other problem, as you point out, is the debt. And the debt growth has accelerated with the recent tax changes. Anytime you mention the idea of more money to education or more money to other social services, lots of people freak out and say we can't afford it. So are you suggesting that we do need to have an increase in the tax base?
I think that most probably we do. But the real issue is mostly productivity, right? In other words, to unleash productivity. There was a time that women weren't part of the workforce. And when they entered the workforce, it caused a great productivity boom. I think if we make it a mission that that group becomes much more productive and has the opportunity. I mean, I think the country, is, what are we about? I think it should be the land of opportunity, and we bring that together and produce those opportunities because that produces productivity.